This is 5 o'clock Shadow. Today's program is dedicated to the nation of Haiti and its electoral, economic, ecological, and epidemiological crises. We will have a very special conversation with Kim Imes, editor and writer with Haiti Liberté. Kim Imes is with us, and we're going to take a look today into the various forms of chaos in Haiti following an election process that has been quite controversial. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Robert.
Well, let's just begin with where is the election, and is there any validity to it? Have there been any significant determinations? Who's pushing it, and what interests are being served and not being served?
Well, for sure, the people's interest is not being served, despite the statement put out by the U.S. Embassy that it wanted to respect the will of the Haitian people. But this election is called by Haitians a C-election, with an S at the beginning, because it from the beginning, has been flawed. It began with the elimination of the largest party in Haiti, the Lavalas family party of exiled former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who 6.5 years after, almost 7 years, after the coup d'etat that overthrew him in February 2004, remains in exile in South Africa. That party was eliminated, which would be the equivalent of eliminating, say, the Democratic and Republican parties from a U.S. election. And then they proceeded from there. The people who were allowed in were all pretty much servants of the empire, we could say, and in one flavor or another. And essentially now 3 of them have come to floated to the top of the jar, as it were. You have Mirland Manigat, who is the wife of former military puppet president, Leslie Manigat, who served for about 4 months at the behest of the neo-devaluerist junta that put him in place in 1988 and then found that he was not quite suitable and threw him out. You have Sweet Mickey, that is Michel Martelly, who is sort of a neo-devaluerist clown who has been a compas musician for many years, but is most distinguished by his severe anti-Aristide sentiments. And then you have Jude Celestin, who is the chosen successor of President René Préval. He is a sort of technocrat who headed the state heavy machinery authority, and apparently has absolutely no political capacities, and in some way has shown himself to be really damaged goods because he has a lot of legal problems now, and it appears even his engineering degree from Switzerland is bogus. So basically these are the 3 contenders. Sweet Mickey was in fact edged out by Celestin in the first round. He came in with 22% to Sweet Mickey's 21%, with Manigat having 31%. So theoretically, the runoff should be between Celestin and Manigat. But there's all kinds of magouille, as they call it in Haiti, monkey business going on with how this second round will be held. And there's a possibility that there will be a 3-way second round, including Martelly, because he's whipped up a lot of his base to go out and burn buildings and create havoc. So they may include him in the second round, which is to be held on January 16th. Now, the final results of that first round were supposed to come out on the 20th, 2 days ago, but the OAS more or less put the kibosh on that, said hold on it till we have a chance to review everything, which really shows how this is not a sovereign Haitian election, but really something controlled by Washington and the international community, quote unquote.
We'll return to the candidates in just a moment, but I'm wondering with Celestin as a successor to Préval, I'm wondering about if he were to prevail, what the continuity would be, because has not the Préval regime been compliant with directives of the United States government and not necessarily those of the Haitian people, certainly with the exclusion of the Famille Lavalin and so on. What would a Celestin victory mean, and what has Préval's history been in terms of Haitian autonomy?
Well, Préval is, to do a thumbnail class analysis, is a child of the enlightened bourgeoisie of Haiti, and in fact was one of the enlightened bourgeois who sort of pushed Aristide into the electoral ring 20 years ago. And he had gone to school in Belgium and had been sort of radicalized at the time by the anti-imperialist movements that were responding to the war in Vietnam and the anti-colonial struggles in Africa and so forth, and Latin America. So he was some sort of anti-imperialist, maybe Marxist at some point. But so often, as somebody once said, bourgeoisies always betray their revolutions. And he really has turned back to become very cynical and really what they call, what Marc Bazin, the original U.S. puppet, used to say, being realistic and accommodating to the U.S. Agenda in Haiti, which is privatization of state industries, lowering of tariff walls, basically locking the country up in a neo-colonial vice, and we could even say, following the occupation that exists today, a colonial vice, and has sold off most of the state industries. I think it's only the airport and the electrical authority that aren't sold off of the 9 that were on the block back in 1991. And he has also opened up the country to the U.S.'s military incursions. They can go in hot pursuit of any of the so-called drug traffickers in the region, which basically gives them license to enter in. So he's to some extent seen as a complete sellout. And, of course, his repression of the Haitian people has increased over these, especially this latest term. So we can expect pretty much the same from his successor. He has in many ways tried to buy off and has bought off a great number of the Lavalas sort of second-tier leaders and integrated them into his party, which he saw as really a replacement for Lavalas, called Unité. And so the expectations are that the Celestin presidency would more or less continue with this tradition of betrayal of the original Lavalas program, which was really a democratic nationalist program.
Well, we're speaking with Kim Ives of Haiti Liberté, which has in its current number an article on one of the other major candidates, Michel Martelly. It's titled Michel Martelly, Stealth Duvalierist. And what do you mean by that, and what are the more, regressive politically undertones of the campaign of this musician?
Yeah, one of the most interesting things about the Martelly candidacy is he had the same slick Spanish public relations firm that Calderon in Mexico had. As we know, Calderon stole the election. It pretty much universally accepted. And in a lot of ways, this firm appears to have backed candidates that objectively, in one way or another, helped U.S. policy. One of the main handlers of the Martelly campaign is the guy who worked on John McCain's campaign. They also helped Lech Walesa in Poland. So, I don't know, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that this outfit, which came in to more or less polish up and soup up the Martelly campaign, had a pedigree which would suggest that there may be some U.S. interest or a U.S. sector behind it. But in short, Martelly has been sort of a provocative, antic-prone musician. He would, pull down his pants on stage, that sort of thing. And he was primarily known, really, as the sort of musician of the coup regimes, particularly the first coup regime, which was, we could say, the most brazen in its anti-democratic nature. They came in, massacred thousands of people in the first week or two of the coup in 1991. And there was Michel Martelly, Sweet Mickey, out singing with them. He had a nightclub which was frequented by the officers of the time and also the bourgeoisie. And he was particularly close with Lieutenant Colonel Michel Francois, who was really the enforcer, the hatchet man of that first coup, presently living in Honduras. So these are the people that Sweet Mickey surrounded himself with. I can remember during the coup being at the Olafson Hotel, which is managed, in fact, by his cousin, Richard Morse, another musician. And you would see these total thugs come in his retinue, and it was, very intimidating, very scary, I'm sure, for anybody who would have had the slightest Lavalas affiliations. So this is really the anti-Aristide, we could say, who is now trying to use a lot of the tactics that Aristide's people used to get him into power. Because I should remind the listeners that in the 1990 election, there was an attempt to steal it from Aristide, even though he was clearly ahead and the people had voted and everybody was obviously in favor of him. In fact, it's often said that he won with 67% of the vote. In fact, that's when they actually stopped counting, because it was going up and up, and it might have ended up being, who knows, 90% if they'd counted more, but I think they only counted 2/3 or 3/4 of the votes. But at one point, Jimmy Carter came and spoke to one of the backers in the bourgeoisie of Aristide and said, he should give it to Marc Bazin, the chosen American candidate, a former World Bank economist, and of course that was rejected. So at that point, the people poured into the streets and basically said, it's clear, because the election went off without a hitch, without a massacre, that Aristide is now going to be president. And the same thing happened in 2006 when René Préval was elected, on the belief that he would bring Aristide back and return to many of Aristide's policies. The people surged up the hill, basically went into the hotel which housed the United Nations, the Montana Hotel, which fell down in the earthquake, and jumped in the hotel's pool. So now what Martelly is doing is he's mobilizing his people in the street and having them go on sort of rampages, burning buildings. They burn down the Celestin headquarters. They burn most of the government buildings in Okai. So it's to make it look to me like a popular uprising in his favor. And for sure he does have some appeal in certain sectors of popular sectors, we could say, perhaps among the lumpen proletariat, etc. But he, nonetheless, is no Aristide, that's for sure.
Pop music is not necessarily populism. On that note, with Michel Martelly, the compa singer, there's another musician, rap artist who would be president, cannot not ask you about Wyclef Jean. What happened to that campaign after the financial scandal and his attempt to run? I understand that he was disqualified on residency grounds, but how did Haiti come from political and cultural leaders to pop artists and propaganda?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for the influence of American popular culture on Haiti during these past 7 years of occupation. And the previous 5 years, from really 2004 through 1994 to 1999, these have all had a serious, I could say, debilitating and corrupting effect on a lot of Haitian culture, and so I think there's something to be said for that. For sure. In the case of Wyclef Jean, he is really an emissary of that American culture as a Haitian-American hip-hop artist. He's really brought a lot of the values, which in many ways are often the most venal, into the Haitian cultural pot. And he right now, his campaign didn't really know how to respond to this disqualification. I don't know if they thought they would just sort of plow right through it. He stepped away, making all sorts of threatening statements, and then more or less reappeared at Sweet Mickey's side. At the,
You're kidding me.
Yeah, on the day of the election, there was a sort of impromptu press conference with 12 of the 19 candidates. In fact, it was 18 because one of the candidates had thrown his support to Manigat. But there was a press conference with Sweet Mickey and Manigat and many of the others to say that they wanted annulment of the election. After that press conference, the three of the candidates, Sweet Mickey, Charles Henry Bacher, who was the number 2 of the National Endowment for Democracy funded front called the Group of 184. He was sort of the vice president.
Kim, please continue. I just want to footnote something here. It is my recollection, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Wyclef Jean comes from a family that was closely associated with the Businessmen's Committee for the Coup.
Yes. Well, he is a nephew of Ray Joseph, who is a former CIA agent, I say former, but he at one point worked for the CIA, set up a CIA radio station in the 60s, Radio Van Van, and went on to become the editor of a right-wing Haitian weekly based here in New York and Brooklyn called Haiti Observateur. They were very much the one of the leading voices of both coups in 91 and 2004. And so Wyclef Jean is his nephew, and at one point they were thought that they would work in tandem. In fact, Ray Joseph also threw his hat into the ring. There were originally 34 presidential candidates, but he was also one of those who was disqualified for residency, not having residency in the country for 5 years previously. So, yes, so just going back to the train of the election day, so after this impromptu press conference, everybody's calling for annulment of the elections. Sweet Mickey, along with Charles Henry Bacquer, the number 2, I said, of the 184, and Wyclef Jean went out on a float and went down the street with, a big crowd going around them. Something looked like carnival or something. Then what happened was the head of the UN mission of the UN occupation force, Edmund Mullet, a former Guatemalan diplomat, called Sweet Mickey and said, "What are you doing? You're leading. You can't ask for annulment of the election. Who ever heard of such a thing?" And then he also called Manigat and said, "You're leading. You can't, get out of this." So both of them unceremoniously dumped their comrades in this front and jumped back in the race, basically saying, "Well, the election will be good if I win, and it won't be good if I don't win." So this sort of put off a lot of people.
There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah. So that is... So Wyclef Jean, just to finish up with him, has sort of been jumping in and out with the Martelly campaign. I don't know where it's ended up. I mean, one of Martelly's handlers was Prod, his former bandmate in the Fugees, and they had some sort of harsh words to say about each other, and things seemed to be a little frosty between them. But in any case, I think he's becoming more and more marginal from being this big force and all sorts of media hype saying he was going to change things. But for sure, their celebrity and their pop music appeal has had something to do with their where they've gotten to today.
We're speaking with Kim Ives of Haiti Liberté. And Kim, we know that the real majority of the Haitian people continue to suffer and reel from the effects of the earthquake of January 2010 and deforestation, foreign policy, exports, economic strictures, and so many things. And now comes cholera. There was an outbreak of cholera that had not been there for many, many decades. And suddenly there's this huge outbreak of cholera that many people believe came from the dirty water downstream of the basing of United Nations troops from Nepal. And
correct.
I'm wondering what is the latest extent and development of that, and has the United States Centers for Disease Control released their study on this subject, or are they still stonewalling?
Right, they're still stonewalling. The latest has been a French government report of one of France's foremost epidemiologists issued a report last week which said it basically is without a doubt that it was the Nepalese who, at the headwaters of the Artibonite River, were dumping their sewage into the river, overflowing cesspools and that sort of thing.
Cholera is fecally transmitted, is it not?
Correct. It is born by water and spread through fecal matter. And of course, in Haiti, that's a recipe for disaster. We now have somewhere in the order of 3,000 deaths, with some 200,000 sickened. I remember, Robert, in the days right after the emergence of it in the Artibonite Valley, we're about 3 days in, and I was talking to a Cuban doctor in Haiti, I was there at the time. And he said, "Oh boy, I'm really worried about this because it's looking like a total disaster in the making. They're doing everything wrong, everything they shouldn't be doing." This was a doctor who had been in Zambia in 1990 when there was a cholera outbreak there. Some 6,000 people died in the area where he was teaching in a hospital. It got so bad that the director of the hospital packed up his wife and kids and fled the country. So he went to the Cuban embassy and said, "What should I do?" Because he was under instructions not to meddle in Zambian administration in any way. And they said, "Well, we have a situation there. I think they talked to the Zambian government and they said, please stay on and do what you can, take over." So he did. He walked back to town, checked the local health ministry there and said, "Do you have any empty schools?" And they said, "No." He said, "Well, do you have any empty buildings at all?" And they said, "Well, we have a stadium over there." And he said, "That'll do." And he rounded up 300 beds, put them in the stadium, and he made the stadium the cholera hospital, because he said the first thing you have to do is isolate the cholera victims from the others, because if you bring cholera victims into a hospital with poor sanitation, etc., everybody is going to get sick. And, of course, this is exactly what they started to do. And the second thing he said is you have to isolate the area. Nobody goes in, nobody goes out. You lock it down. It creates problems for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but at least you stop the spread of the disease. What they did, unfortunately, was they brought they let the disease get to the capital, where everybody goes through from all corners of the country. And once it got there, it spread everywhere. So now Haiti has gone through all of, the cholera has gone through all of Haiti's 10 departments. And, given the sanitation in the country, it's going to be there for a while.
This is 5 o'clock Shadow. I'm Robert Knight, speaking with Kim Ives, writer and editor at Haiti Liberté. And I have two more questions for you, Kim. One of them is, whatever happened to all those billions of dollars of aid that was to be administered by the unlikely tandem team of former presidents Clinton and Bush? And what has the effectiveness of the Obama administration, for that matter, been in addressing the root issues and helping Haiti?
Well, the Obama administration has essentially, as in almost everything else, been continuing the same policies as the Bush administration, doing nothing to support the democratic and sovereign interests of the Haitian people, but rather undermining them. For instance, this selection that just took place cost about $29 million. The U.S. put about half of that money. They didn't object when the Lavalas family was eliminated from the contest, essentially making it a futile exercise. And the Obama administration has really been behind the takeover of the Haitian government by a thing called the Interim Commission for the Reconstruction of Haiti, which is headed by former President Bill Clinton, who, as we know, is sort of Obama's godfather, if not his guiding light, his eminence grise. So the commission, called the CIRH, is essentially in charge of deciding how these billions of dollars, which have been pledged, only about 3% of which have actually materialized, are going to be spent in Haiti. And what this means is essentially they're going to decide who gets the contracts. And you can be sure that the reason they put Bill Clinton at the head of this thing is so the contracts will go to the U.S. contractors. And in fact, there was an article just the other day explaining how most of the contracts are going to American contractors and practically none are going to Haitian contractors. And some months ago, I talked to a local businessman who was trying to get a cut of the action, as they say, and he was saying, in talking to Leslie Voltaire, who was sort of not only a presidential candidate, but Bill Clinton's assistant, said only 15% is earmarked for Haitian contractors. So essentially the role of this Clinton-directed interim commission is to direct all the billions into the pockets of U.S. contractors, bail out for the contractors, if you will, the Halliburtons, the DynCorps, the Brown and Roots. There's a number of others who have been setting up down there. One of them, a thing called Ashbridge out of Florida, spent $25 million just to build their base, their compound for, with showers and garages and so forth for the money coming in. So they're planning to get at least $25 million of business out of it. As for the Clinton-Bush Foundation is something separate from that, but that equally, I don't have the latest figures on hand, but a large percentage, the majority of their funds have not yet been spent, even though you have 1.5 million people still living under tents and tarps without any permanent housing. They say they're holding it for the long term. This is the same song being given by the Red Cross and a bunch of other NGOs who collected billions of dollars as well off the Haitian people's misfortune. So it's a scandal. It's just unbelievable. You just can't believe how cynical these new unelected, self-appointed, self-enriching leaders of Haiti, foreign, are.
Apparently, big business is attempting to do what Napoleon failed to do in Haiti. This is 5 O'Clock Shadow, and we're speaking with Kim Ives, editor and writer for Haiti Liberté. And finally, Kim, here on The Shadow, we've been following another former French colony that has a contested and chaotic election, and that is the nation of Côte d'Ivoire. And in the course of surveying that, we presented many of the State Department cables released by WikiLeaks. Among them, a most stunning series of 3 cables that refer to the end of the French Empire. The so-called France-Afrique has come to a collapse after some number of centuries, with the French government's turning over its colonial interests to the United States to compete against China in Francophone Africa. And what struck me about those insider views of the Washington establishment is that when they spoke about the decline of France as colonial power, there is no mention of Haiti. And to my recollection, it was Haiti which was the first and boldest rejectionist of French domination. Can you help put that in context?
Well, that's correct. Haiti really began the process of decolonization with its 1804 revolution. I mean, it was 13 years from 1791 to 1804. It broke the chains of French colonialism, not at its weakest link, at its strongest, and set in motion the decolonization of Latin America. It was the Haitians that gave Bolivar his support, weapons, and printing presses, and so forth, to liberate the continent on the condition that he also liberate all the slaves, and really became an example for people seeking freedom the world over. And I think really the ideals of the French Revolution, liberté, égalité, fraternité, were really taken up by Haiti. It was the true messenger of this revolutionary ideal throughout history, and in a way, this is why it has been punished. It's interesting that Aristide often refers to this being in Africa. he now said, when I was speaking to him a couple of years ago when we went over there when he got his doctorate in language and philosophy from the University of South Africa, that he said, I didn't realize how deep the links are between Africa and Haiti, and how just from a linguistic point of view, how close it is. Cultural, what he called a sort of a psycho-linguistic identity and way of seeing the world. So I feel in many ways Haiti is that extension, and the sort of parallel now between Ivory Coast, where so many Haitians can trace their ancestors to, and Haiti, both in a way confronting this international peacekeeping paradigm of, we're going to do your elections and provide your security and basically run your show, that it's now hitting a rock, or hitting a reef, as they say in Creole, in both countries at the same time.
Thank you for the history and the insight. Kim Ives, editor and writer at Haiti Liberté. Kim, how can people get the paper and find out more about your investigative research into the nation of Haiti?
Well, they can visit us at HaitiLiberté.com. That's liberty with an E on the end instead of a Y. And they can call us here in Brooklyn. Our number is 718-421-0162. We are here almost 7 days a week and have many events on the weekends, and have a bookstore and so forth out here. So we're just a stone's throw away.
Well, thank you, Kim. This is 5 o'clock Shadow on the Pacifica Radio Network, originating at WBAI in New York, 99.5 FM, and streaming on the web. Our email address is theshadow@wbai.org. My name is Robert Knight, and we have considered at this radio station the noble history and courage of the Haitian people, including a reference to Haiti's leadership in helping to collapse the French colonial empire in our documentary, The Sweet Science of Racism in Haiti. More after this.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs.
You are listening to The Sweet Science of Racism in Haiti, an Earthwatch documentary special produced by your host, Robert Knight, Senior National Correspondent at WBAI in New York, Pacifica, Radio for a Change.
Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind.
In the afternoon of January 12, 2010, on the western third of the Caribbean island now known as Hispaniola, the nation of Haiti endured a devastating earthquake of Richter magnitude 7. The quake leveled homes, offices, shelters, and even the presidential palace, taking with it the souls of as many as 250,000 Haitians. Tens of thousands more impoverished earthquake victims who had migrated to the capital for economic reasons were, once again, displaced to the ecologically devastated countryside, fleeing potential mudslides that were threatened by spring rains. Months later, as Haiti struggled to recover, the nation, created in 1804 by the world's first successful African slave revolt, found itself still under military occupation by the United Nations, political domination by the United States, and economic domination by an industrial relief agenda that critics see as a bonanza for foreign investors, with high-profit and low-wage assembly plants for products destined for the international market. Throughout the crisis, most of the American media repeatedly tagged their reports with the unexamined mantra that Haiti is the hemisphere's poorest nation. Most reports ignored the fundamental context of centuries of invasion, occupation, and subversion by Europe, Spain, France, and the United States. They ignored the legacy of restrictive export policies and substandard wages for subsistence workers. Also absent from most American media was significant analysis of the crippling reparations that African heritage Haitians were forced to pay France for their own manumission against colonial plantation slavery. They neglected to mention United States military occupation from 1915 to 1934 and the repeated installation of friendly dictators. There was no examination of the persistently race-based foreign policy of the United States, whose historical leaders feared that Haitians would export freedom to their black peers on the southern shores of North America during the 19th century. As the most recent geological disaster developed, your producer wondered why these details were missing from the popular American narrative on Haiti. How a nation that once provided half the world's coffee and sugar cane could be reduced to such poverty, and what really happened to the indigenous people who preceded the African slaves, the Arawak, Taino, and Carib people who first named the island and the sea surrounding it. Thus, this program is dedicated to the people of Haiti, whose real story is ultimately more one of triumph than of tragedy.
Haïti, c'est histoire. Haïti, c'est histoire pao. Haïti, c'est histoire. En nous lever pour Haïti. En nous mobiliser pour Haïti. Tout le monde ensemble pour Haïti. Fait qu'on parle pour Haïti. En nous kembe la.
We begin our exploration of Haiti's early history with an excerpt from the late historian Howard Zinn's seminal textbook, A People's History of the United States. In this section, he describes the December 5, 1492 encounter between the European colonial explorer Christopher Columbus and the Taino natives of the island that he called Hispaniola after his Spanish backers, but whose original Arawak name, inspired by its western mountains, was Haiti. Arawak men and women, naked, tawny, and full of wonder, emerged from their villages onto the island's beaches and swam out to get a closer look at the strange big boat. When Columbus and his sailors came ashore, carrying swords, speaking oddly, the Arawaks ran to greet them, brought them food, water, gifts. He later wrote of this in his log. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. As soon as I arrived in the Indies, on the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force, in order that they might learn, and might give me information of whatever there is in these parts." End quote. The information that Columbus wanted most was, where is the gold? Columbus concluded his report by asking for a little help from their majesties, and in return he would bring them from his next voyage, quote, "as much gold as they need and as many slaves as they ask." They went from island to island in the Caribbean, taking Indians as captives. A report of the year 1650 shows none of the original Arawaks or their descendants left on the island. As the African slave trade grew in the Americas, Spain's grip on the gateway island of Hispaniola was challenged by the continual 17th century raids of French buccaneers. Aided by English and Portuguese pirates of the Caribbean's Windward Passage, the heavily armed French buccaneers eventually seized control of the western third of Hispaniola. Spain and France fought for the territory until the Ryswick Treaty of 1697, when it was ceded to France and renamed Saint-Domingue. During the Parisian ascendancy, the colony produced half of Europe's coffee, sugar, tobacco, and indigo, and prospered from the actuarial expertise of French accountants, who precisely calculated the work capacity and life expectancy of African slaves down to the franc and to the month. One of those former slaves was a Haitian revolutionary leader named Henri Christophe, who described the similarities between the Spanish treatment of so-called Indians and the French treatment of African slaves. Quoting, "Have they not hung up men with heads downward and drowned them in sacks, crucified them on planks, buried them alive, crushed them in mortars? Have they not forced them to consume feces? And having flayed them with the lash, have they not cast them alive to be devoured by worms, or onto ant hills, or lashed them to stakes in the swamp to be devoured by mosquitoes? Have they not thrown them into boiling cauldrons of cane syrup? Have they not put men and women inside barrels studded with spikes and rolled them down mountainsides into the abyss? Have they not consigned these miserable blacks to man-eating dogs until the latter, sated by human flesh, left the mangled victims to be finished off with bayonet and poignard?" End quote. By the end of the 18th century, a white French contingent of 32,000 settlers dominated nearly 1 million African slaves. Between 1783 and 1791, with 800,000 slaves already abducted to Haiti, a full third of the ongoing Atlantic slave trade was destined for Saint-Domingue. In 1791, 2 years after the French Revolution, the black slaves and so-called gens de couleur of Haiti began a rebellion whose goal of slave liberation echoed the Parisian cries of liberté, égalité, fraternité. They took to the hills, as had the Arawaks and Tainos before them, taking the name of Maroons, short for the Spanish word meaning the mountains. Some 4,000 Maroons were trained in guerrilla tactics and led by Toussaint Louverture, a freedman who fought with the Spanish against France in hopes of ending slavery, then rejoined the French army in 1794. By 1798, Louverture had repulsed British invaders who had also been at war with France, and emboldened by the victories of his lieutenants, Henri Christophe and Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Louverture conquered Santo Domingo in January 1801. He freed the slaves and announced a new constitution that declared, quote, "There cannot exist slaves in Saint-Domingue. Servitude is therein forever abolished." In Part 1, we considered the Colombian colonialism of cruelty resulting in Spain's genocide of the Arawak, Taino, and Carib natives of the island of Haiti, which would then come to be known as Hispaniola. We covered the importation of African slaves to replace the so-called Indians and the first and only successful African slave rebellion, resulting in colonial independence from France. Part 1 culminated with the dispatch by the French first consul, Napoleon Bonaparte, of a war fleet to the place that would become his first Waterloo. Napoleon was defeated by the Afro-Haitian rebels under the inspired leadership of Toussaint Louverture. France lost 50,000 soldiers, including 18 generals in the conflict. Although the liberationist Toussaint prevailed over the slavery reimposing Napoleon, Louverture was nevertheless captured by subterfuge, shackled, and abducted to Paris, where he spent his final days imprisoned, deprived, and possibly poisoned, until his death in 1803 in the prison citadel known as Fort Lejeune, where his corpse was nibbled by rats. But Louverture had prophetically proclaimed that, quote, "In overthrowing me, you have cut down in Saint-Domingue only the trunk of the tree of liberty. It will spring up again from the roots, for they are many and they are deep."
Ironically, in the end, it was Louverture who had the last laugh on Bonaparte. The exiled Haitian named Toussaint from an island in the Atlantic may have died in France, but a Frenchman named Napoleon also died in exile on an African island in the Atlantic.
The Haitian defeat of Napoleon's armada to the Americas was of profound benefit to two nations. It paved the way for the declaration of Haitian independence in 1804, but it also made possible the single greatest territorial expansion of the recently formed United States of America. Haiti's victory over France enabled President Thomas Jefferson's greatest accomplishment, the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the landmass of the United States. Napoleon Bonaparte's failure to conquer and re-enslave Haiti in 1801 meant the loss of lucrative sugar revenues from the slave plantations of Saint-Domingue and the devaluing of the French-claimed strategic city of New Orleans in the Mexican Gulf at the foot of the Mississippi River. Pressed to prepare for war with Great Britain, Napoleon tried to cut his losses with the offer to sell to the United States the city of New Orleans along with the huge French territory west of the Mississippi, stretching all the way to the Rocky Mountains. With the signing of the Louisiana Purchase on May 2, 1803, Jefferson obtained the port city, freedom of transit and commerce on the Mississippi, and 829,000 square miles of land for $15 million at the rock-bottom price of 3 cents an acre. As W.E.B. Du Bois observed in his thesis on Suppression of the African Slave Trade to the United States of America, 1638 to 1870, quoting, "The role which the great Negro Toussaint called Louverture played in the history of the United States has seldom been fully appreciated. Representing the age of revolution in America, he rose to leadership through a bloody terror which contrived a Negro problem for the Western Hemisphere, intensified and defined the anti-slavery movement, became one of the causes, and probably the prime one, which led Napoleon to sell Louisiana for a song, and through the interworking of all of these effects, rendered more certain the final prohibition of the slave trade by the United States in 1807. Despite Jefferson's geostrategic debt to Haiti and his eloquence for American freedom, his attitude to the African heritage freedom-seeking people of Haiti was hostile and subject to the racial bigotry of his day. As the slave rebellion grew in the 1790s, Jefferson called the freedom movement in Saint-Domingue, quote, a dangerous fermentation. In 1801, Jefferson even offered to support Napoleon's attack on Toussaint Louverture and attempted re-enslavement of Haiti. Jefferson did not reverse his counter-revolutionary position on Haiti until the following year, when he discovered that Napoleon intended to use Haiti, or Saint-Domingue, as a beachhead for colonizing the entire Western Hemisphere. Still, Jefferson's continuing antipathy to Afro-Haitians was revealed in his reference to them as cannibals of that terrible republic, quote. Jefferson declared that people of color are, quote, by their habits rendered as incapable as children of taking care of themselves and are extinguished promptly whenever industry is necessary for raising young. In the meantime, they are pests in society by their idleness and the depredations to which this leads them. Their amalgamation with the other color produces a degradation which no lover of his country, no lover of excellence in the human character can innocently consent. End quote, Thomas Jefferson.
Rejoice, Columbia's sons, rejoice, to tyrants never bend the knee. Join with heart, with soul and voice, for Jefferson and liberty.
There was yet one more surprise waiting for Haiti on the 17th of February 2010, when, for the first time after 2 centuries, the former colony was visited by a French head of state, in the person of Nicolas Sarkozy. History does not record his thoughts, whether he rued the Francophobic fervor of the recently discovered Haitian Declaration of Independence, whether he feared garnishment of Haiti's reparations for freedom to France that bankrupted the new nation for a century and a half, or whether he had urgent legal reasons to flee the jurisdiction. What is known is that Sarkozy spent only 5 hours in Haiti, and those under heavily armed guard.
Beyond the urgent need to help this country which is so dear to us, my presence in Haiti, the first of a French head of state since independence, has a particular resonance. In my mind, it is not only about turning our backs on the past, that of a rich but painful common history. Let us not hide from the fact that our presence here hasn't left just good memories.
Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. And don't
Despite the obstacles of bigotry and poverty, the history and hopes of the Haitian people have been an inspiration, not only to their own nation, but to freedom-seeking people around the world. Their triumphs and inspiration belong to us all, and not only the students of history, but as well students of the future, such as these children from PS 64 in the South Bronx of New York City, who recently rallied for Haiti following the devastating earthquake of 2010.
Tell me, what's this walk about?
Oh, this walk about is for Haiti.
Why are you doing it?
So that way Haiti can have help and rebuild all of its beauty.
Did people help you?
Yes. We Haiti's the best. We got donation money from people. We have to help Haiti a lot because they need help.
Yeah, why do they need help?
Because they got an earthquake. And it damaged everything in their country.
Do you know what's happening now?
I think they're trying to help Haiti, like, to get money and they start they're getting band-aids and stuff over their cuts.
Well, that's very beautiful.
We're gonna come on news.
Yeah. Yeah, I work at WBAI. Yeah, you heard of it? You raised a lot of money?
Yep. Over $11,000.
That's wonderful.
I donated money. I donated $10 to Haiti.
Why'd you do that?
So Haiti can have more fortunate.
Today we're helping raise money for Partners in Health, which is an organization that helps Haiti. And they've been there for 20 years.
What are the groups?
The New Settlement After School Program at PS 64. And we have almost about 300 students within our after school program here with us.
You have been listening to The Sweet Science of Racism in Haiti.
I'm Robert Knight for 5 O'Clock Shadow.